the applause. We're back from our break, our summer break, and I can tell you, I think I'm 22 cases up in smoked salmon. Yes. I'm really glad that we have this panel here. Craig Richards is here, and sort of a local radio hero these days. He is an attorney who specializes in oil and gas and finance and tax law. He has an MBA in finance from Duke University, elitist. I'm kidding, and has recently litigated cases involving the tax value of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System. So in addition, he has worked with Bill Walker for a number of years trying to commercialize North Slope gas. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And next to him, of course, the old bull rider, Steve Heimel, who is a 29-year veteran Alaskan broadcaster. He hosts Talk of Alaska on APRN on his Sunday Americana show. Is that fair?
Sure.
Americana,
yeah.
The truck stop. He is the old bull rider for sure. And I have to tell you that this last Sunday, it was your radio program and dueling whistles on the top of the canners for like, what was it, an hour and 50 minutes. Yeah.
Goes well with Hank Williams.
It did. It was lovely. Thank you. Anyway, I encourage people to listen to that. Also, John Aronno is here, and he's an award-winning columnist, blogger at Alaska Commons and Alaska Dispatch's Talk of the Tundra, president of Alaska Young Democrats, and a new co-host of Studio 1080 on some radio station called KUDO.
Yes.
Really glad to have you guys all here. So Joelle Hall was just here. She's a rock star. She really is. Wouldn't you hate to be against her in a courtroom?
She was incredibly articulate.
I know, and she's a girl. It's amazing. No, she's really wonderful. And I think that this is interesting, this ballot measure 1. I just want to get your impressions on it. For one thing, to have so many different Alaskans, we really like to fight. And to have so many Alaskans coming up and saying, okay, this is a bad law, is pretty amazing. When you've got the Chamber of Commerce and the unions on the same side, you probably should just do what they say. Steve Heimel?
I think Alaskans always love it when some outsider comes up here and spends a whole lot of money and it totally falls flat. And that may be what happens here. We don't get the ridiculous ballot measures that California does. And where I come on the East Coast, they don't allow this power of initiative. It's kind of neat. It's a young state. Most of the young states, they have the power of initiative. And in Alaska, it's viewed by the Supreme Court that the voters have a kind of sovereignty. And so even though it's unconstitutional, the Supreme Court will allow it to appear on the ballot. And even though it's flagrantly unconstitutional, probably both of the ballot measures are fairly obviously unconstitutional.
Right.
And yet
they're ballot bait. They're to get a certain side to the ballot, I think. But
well, there you go. That's exactly what needs to be considered here. Who's going to be driven to the polls during the primary election by this issue or that other issue?
Well, that's why you put them on. And you know, maybe we need a law that says that, you know, puppies need Tic Tacs because their mouth smells funny, and see if we can't get out all the, you know, Iditarod people. Let me ask you, what do you make of ballot initiatives? I mean, you obviously studied law so much. Do you think should we have a ballot initiative to end ballot initiatives?
You know, I like direct democracy. I think it provides a flavor that you don't get through your typical legislative process. It allows the people to speak directly with their own voice without having to go through the typical legislative process. But the inconsequence of that is that you can get some pretty kooky stuff on the ballot. And I think this is clearly one. You know, I represent a number of municipalities, and the outcome for them of this bill will be that they can't hire lobbyists to go down to Juneau to fight for their interests, but BP, ConocoPhillips, and ExxonMobil can. I mean, it seems like we've got it exactly backwards. Those are the people we need to get out of Juneau. They're not the people we should be leaving the sole ones down there advocating.
Oh my God, you had me at, those are the ones we should get out of Juneau. You know, the ones that are down there maxing out the $14.99 lunch specials. And frankly, there's several of you legislators that should lay off the $14.99 and go to the gym with your lobbyist. I'm serious. You can tell who's got the biggest oil legislation is usually the guy that's got the biggest belt. Just saying, no judgment, eat on. John Aronno, what do you make of this? I mean, you're newer to Alaska, and this ballot initiative, you of course followed Prop 8 in California, where you're from. So, what do you make of it? Should we have ballot initiative to end ballot initiatives, or is it a good thing?
You know, I appreciate what you said in terms of I like the fact that it is direct democracy, but there is kind of a tricky line there where it goes from direct democracy to, okay, we're just going to put this on the ballot so that, you know, we know it's not going to pass constitutional muster. We know that there's going to be millions and millions in taxpayer dollars spent, you know, in lawyer fees and everything like that, fighting it afterwards. So it's a weird line. And I remember going to the Chamber of Commerce, you know, not exactly the coffee party, for a debate with all the governor candidates and Governor Parnell. And when they introduced the gag law, the chamber said, no, we don't support this. This is horrible. And every candidate said, no, 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 no. And then Samuel's, I don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yeah.
He was unaware of this.
He wasn't, I'll get back to you. But it's just, there does have to be that line of direct democracy. People should have a say. People should be able to, if the government's failing to bring voice to a subject, people should be able to say, no, we're screaming about this, you need to listen.
So maybe, and I'm just thinking of this now, I know, but what if we had a rule that said for something to appear on the ballot to become law, it must be found constitutional?
But who would decide that to you?
Would it be the Attorney General?
Well,
I mean, the Attorney General is the one that picks out, actually, I think it's the Lieutenant Governor that picks out the language and everything. But we've already spent tax or Alaska funds in fighting these ballots.
Sure. Well, you already have requirements that ballot initiatives meet a whole bunch of rules and limitations. But one of the things that they can't do is pre-litigate a ballot initiative in time to get it on the ballot. You know, the wheels of justice move slowly. It can take years to litigate a constitutional case up through the courts. So I think it's just a practical realization that if there's a complex constitutional question, there's no way you can get something on the ballot, get a constitutional determination from the state or the federal Supreme Courts in time for people to vote on it.
So,
Okay.
But in answer to your question, yeah, the Lieutenant Governor relies on the Attorney General's advice. And
Well, that explains a lot in this year.
the Attorney General works for the Governor.
He does. He's appointed by the Governor. He was actually the Attorney General we have now, Dan Sullivan, not to be confused with the other Dan Sullivan, the one under Hinkie. If you Google, he's a carpetbagger. I mean, this guy is an Alaskan. He was a Bush appointee. Sarah Palin appointed him, and he has messed up on considerable things that have included 2 people losing their jobs. I mean, the fact that that's the guy you go to is a little bit stressful.
Hey, remember Renkus?
Yes, I do. Thanks. The therapy was working until you said that. Okay, so here's my question. I want to move into this and take a part of the show for this. The 2 sides, the Democratic ticket, Ethan Berkowitz and Hollis French, the Republican ticket, which is Ralph Samuels, Sean Parnell, and Bill Walker. The Lieutenant Governor's race on both sides has been interesting to watch. But what seems to be the defining thing in all of this, on both sides, on the Democratic side certainly, and on the Republican, is oil, is how we're going to tax oil. And you're an oil tax attorney.
I am.
And apparently a socialist and a communist, according to Dan Fagan.
He looks like one to me.
I was going to say, I said on the radio today, I'm both a socialist and a communist, which of course is mutually exclusive because you can't be both.
Right. Well, you know, and if you're just throwing labels around or pulling them out of some sort of orifice or crevice, facts don't matter. They just really don't. You actually called in to his program because he was misrepresenting some of the, some of the facts. I know, don't confuse me with the facts, Dan, but, and you were trying to correct him on it, and because you corrected him on it and he didn't want to admit that, he basically went ballistic on you.
Right, he was just confused. All the reserves tax, and we're going back to the 2006 ballot initiative that Eric Croft and Terry Crawford got on the ballot.
And the reason this comes up is because all the governor's candidates were asked about this,
right.
Republicans, this week, and Bill Walker had come out and said that he had voted for it when he was a private
right.
citizen. So this came up, so the reserve tax.
Right, so it was just a discussion from my end. I wasn't even trying to get involved in the politics. I just didn't like how he didn't understand how the taxes work. You know, I can't stand when people are inexact about these things. So
because you are a tax attorney
Right.
and you picked it.
right, exactly.
Right, it wasn't like draw the short straw, okay, now I'm not gonna be a rock star, I'm gonna be a tax attorney, you picked it.
I did, yeah. So the thing with the reserves tax is right now on the North Slope, there is a property tax on all oil and gas property. It's if you own a car, you own a well, you own a helicopter, you have a pipeline up on the North Slope, you pay a 2% property tax, just like you and I pay on our houses in Anchorage. But exempted from the property tax is their leasehold interest. That's the North Slope lease. That's a real property interest. Basically the same thing as land you own. So what the reserves tax would have done is it would have removed that exemption that they currently enjoy on essentially the value of their land. And Dan Fagan was on the show talking about how this was some sort of communist assets tax that would have, meant the end of civilization as we know it.
Right.
And of course, it's the same tax that all of us pay on our house and pay on the land of our house. So
right. So if you buy a car, you pay tax on that purchase, but you also have your registration and everything else. And then your house is assessed, and then you also pay on the property. So basically, what is going on is that they're paying on the house and the car, but not the land that it sits on.
Exactly.
So it's not even really, okay.
So this is just the way.
So you were just trying to correct that, but it came into something about if you had a hardware store and then the government said you had to buy 2 more, I mean, it was totally ridiculous, and it was more like if you made hammers and you sold them to one store and that store refused to sell them, and then you went and said, I want my hammers back, and they'd say no.
Right. I mean, I think, first of all, apparently he doesn't like property taxes because he calls them communist. But I also think that he thought the idea of the state using its taxing policy to force the North Slope producers to sell gas into a pipeline was some violation of American capitalistic principles, which to me is nonsense. I mean, when the founders of the Constitution, the state constitution, wrote it, Bob Bartlett in his keynote address recognized that one of the dangers facing Alaska was that outside corporate interests would occupy large areas of Alaska land and prevent it from development because they didn't want to keep it from competing with their interests elsewhere. So one of the things they did in the Constitution...
Oh, they wouldn't do that.
They would.
Was he overreacting?
Well, one of the things they did in the Constitution was they didn't adopt a uniformity clause in the taxing provision, which means that we as a state can levy a property tax at different rates on different types of property. And the exact reason they did that is because the framers wanted to make sure the state could tax land that was being held off the market and being held from development. And the reserves tax was just an idea based on the constitutional framework of the state to sort of use our taxing power to get the North Slope producers to sell somebody gas.
Which seems like a good idea if you're an Alaskan. I mean, if you're for Alaskan interests. We're at a break. I want to come back and ask Steve to look into the past and see, does this actually go, historically along some sort of communist lines, socialist lines, and get John's take on this as well.
It's the owner state.
It's the owner state, I know. Thank you, Wally Hickle, the ghost of Wally Hickle. We'll be right back with more Up North.